I need to tell you something. If your child has been turned against you, if the phone stopped ringing, if the holidays became silent, if you lie awake wondering what you did wrong, I need you to hear something before you click away from this video. You are not the reason why this happened. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why I can say that with confidence, because the research backs it up. My name is Kathy Jo Hart, and today we're talking about something that affects over 22 million adults in the United States alone. A crisis that researchers are calling a silent epidemic, and yet most people have never even heard the term. We are talking about parental alienation. So let's start with what parental alienation actually is, because there's a lot of confusion out there. Parental alienation is when one parent systematically and deliberately turns a child against the other parent, not because the other parent did something wrong, not because the child independently decided they didn't want a relationship, but because the alienating parent is running a campaign, sometimes subtle, sometimes aggressive, to erase the other parent from the child's life. Now, I want to be really clear about something. This is not the same as estrangement. Estrangement is when a child pulls away because a parent is genuinely abusive, neglectful, or harmful. That is a legitimate act of self-protection. There is also another type of estrangement that has become a social contagion. Powerful influences that spark emotional responses and can be easily manipulated by skilled marketers, politicians, and social media platforms. These contagions shape human behavior by spreading emotions rapidly among group or movements. But parental alienation is different. It is manufactured. The child's rejection doesn't come from their own experience. It comes from the alienating parent's narrative. So what does this look like in real life? It involves one parent persistently undermining the other, teaching children to make false accusations, preventing phone calls and visits, and reshaping family history so that the child believes the targeted parent is at fault for issues like divorce, or to see a parent as toxic, narcissistic, and uncaring. Special occasions like birthdays and holidays are used against the targeted parent. Eventually, the child accepts this rewritten narrative as their own, which is what makes it particularly harmful. The child truly thinks they are acting on their own beliefs, though those choices were shaped for them. Now, there's a particular kind of grief that comes with this. It doesn't get a name in most circles. You cannot bury it and move on. There's no funeral, no casseroles from neighbors, no bereavement leave from work. The person you're grieving is alive. And because they're breathing, most people around you, even people who love you, don't understand why you can't just get over it. Psychologist Pauline Boss has a term for what you are carrying. It's called ambiguous loss. The child is physically present in the world, but psychologically, they are absent from your life. It is one of the most disorienting forms of grief a human being can experience, precisely because there's no endpoint. No closure is handed to you. And I want to say one more thing before we go any further. Research by Jennifer Harmon and her colleagues found that nearly half of alienated parents, people in your exact situation, have contemplated suicide in the past year. If you've been there, I want you to hear this clearly. Your pain is documented. It is real. It is not weakness or self-pity. It is the predictable consequence of a specific kind of loss that most of the mental health world still doesn't fully understand. And this video exists in part because you deserve better information than you're probably getting. We're going to get into what research actually says about what happened to your child, about what happens next, and about what you can do. This is not comfort. This is not false hope. This is information. Let's start with what was done to your child, not to excuse what they've done to you. I'm not going to do that. But because if you don't understand the mechanism, you will spend years interpreting their behavior as a verdict on your worth as a parent. And that interpretation is wrong. Researcher Amy Baker spent years studying adults who were alienated from a parent during childhood. What she found is uncomfortable but important. The tactics used by alienating parents closely mirror the tactics used by cult leaders. Think about what a cult does. It demands exclusive devotion. It portrays the outside world and specific people in it as dangerous, toxic, or unworthy of loyalty. It uses love withdrawal as punishment. If you question the narrative, you lose belonging. The child, like a cult member, is not choosing freely. They are operating inside a system that has been carefully constructed to make one relationship feel safe and all others feel threatening. Baker identified 17 specific behaviors alienating parents use. Things like bad-mouthing the targeted parent in front of the child, intercepting phone calls and letters, telling the child the targeted parent doesn't love them or is dangerous, creating the impression that the targeted parent is responsible for the family's pain, limiting time and contact, forcing the child to choose sides, rewarding rejection, withdrawing affection when the child showed positive feelings toward the targeted parent. None of this is subtle. But here's what makes it so effective. It happens gradually, over years. Inside the one relationship, the child has no choice but to navigate. Children are not equipped to critically analyze a parent. They are wired to attach, to trust, and to survive within whatever family system they are born into. What Baker also found, and this is critical, is that alienation was almost never fully internalized, even by the most rejecting children. Underneath the cutoff, underneath the anger or coldness or silence, the desire for connection with you persists. It doesn't just disappear. It gets buried under a protective layer that the child built to survive the environment they were in. That's not a small thing. There's also an attachment framework worth understanding here. Research on disorganized attachment, which is common in children raised by controlling, manipulative, or emotionally volatile parents, shows that children can develop a simultaneously fearful and compulsive relationship with the more demanding parent. They are drawn to protect that parent's narrative, even against their own instincts, because the cost of not doing so feels catastrophic. Your child did not arrive at this position freely. That doesn't mean they bear no responsibility now that they're an adult. But it does mean that their rejection of you is a symptom of something that was done to them, not a clean, uninfluenced verdict. Let me give you the numbers. I'm going to be precise because I think you deserve precision and not vague reassurance. Karl Pillemer at Cornell has documented that roughly 27% of Americans are estranged from a family member. This is not a rare experience, though it can feel profoundly isolating. Here is the more important number. The Cornell Family Reconciliation Project, published in 2021, found that 61% of adult children who had initiated estrangement from a parent eventually wanted contact again. That's more than half. But only 19% of parents reported the same desire, which tells you something about who carries this pain most heavily and who is most motivated for reconciliation. In the Children's Journal research on adults who had been alienated as children, found that 80% eventually reunified with the targeted parent. That's 80%. That number is real. Hold on to it, not as a guarantee, but as context. There is also a finding about intergenerational transmission that I want you to hear. 50% of adults who were alienated as children went on to become targeted parents themselves. This is not coincidence. It reflects how deeply these patterns embed themselves in family systems, and is one reason this work matters far beyond your individual situation. And then there's the statistic I had already mentioned. Nearly half of alienated parents contemplated suicide in the past year. That research was conducted by Dr. Jennifer Harmon and her colleagues. The point isn't to alarm you. The point is, if you are struggling at that level, you are not alone, and this is not a disproportionate response to a minor grievance. This is a serious trauma, and it deserves serious support, which I'll come back to. Here is where I have to be honest with you in a way that might be uncomfortable. There are things that targeted parents do, things that feel completely natural given what they're going through, that actively make reconnection less likely, not because the parent is bad, but because grief and fear produce strategies that backfire. The most common one is chasing, sending message after message, showing up unexpectedly, escalating contact when there's no response. The instinct is completely understandable. Your child is out there. You love them. You want them to know you haven't given up. But here's what the research and clinical experience consistently show. High-frequency, emotionally urgent contact almost always reinforces the narrative that was constructed about you. Think about what the alienating influence said. It probably included something like, this parent is unstable. This parent is controlling. This parent doesn't respect boundaries. Every frantic message, every showing up unannounced, every escalating outreach becomes evidence in your child's mind that the story they were told is true. The second trap is the false apology. This is subtle and important. When a targeted parent desperate for contact writes a lengthy letter apologizing for things they don't believe they actually did, or apologizing disproportionately for real but minor mistakes, They inadvertently confirm the narrative. Dad apologized for everything becomes, so he admits it. The apology intended to open a door instead closes it. This is not an argument against accountability. If you genuinely contributed to relationship damage, owning it clearly and specifically is valuable. But vague, sweeping apologies designed to appease, rather than genuine acknowledgement of specific harm, tend to backfire. The third trap is reactive contact. Angry letters confronting the alienating parent, involving other family members in ways that feels like pressure. This is again understandable. You're in pain. You want answers. You want someone to intervene. But any escalation that feels like conflict to your adult child tends to confirm the threat narrative and drives them closer to whoever is positioned as their protector. And the hardest truth here, some of what you've done since the estrangement, out of love, out of fear, out of raw grief, may have made the path back longer. Not because you're a bad parent. It's because nobody teaches you how to do this right. And the instincts that work in normal relationship conflict, they don't work here. Now we are at the end of our show. Please join me next time as we continue with the silent epidemic of adult alienation. Our next show will include how to respond to deliberate and harmful conversations, a powerful way to respond to cruelty, and what research recommends how to create low-contact communications. Please check your screen for part 2, and may God bless you on your journey.